So, usually when we talk about finding meaning in life or really finding the truth in any situation, there's this heavy expectation of excavation.
Oh, absolutely. Like you have to dig for it.
Right. It feels like we're all trained to be the archaeologists of our own existence. Think about it. You go through a tough breakup, or you lose a job, or, you just feel a general sense of malaise.
Yeah, that everyday kind of thread.
Exactly. And the immediate advice from everyone, friends, therapists, self-help books, is to look deep inside yourself.
Always do the inner work. Right?
Yeah. We're told to dig past the superficial layers, to get down into the bedrock of our childhood traumas or our hidden desires, just to find the hidden truth. It's like meaning is treated as this buried treasure.
Or conversely, you get the advice to look up.
Oh, like to the heavens.
Right, to seek some higher divine purpose that explains it all from above. The idea that everything happens for a reason designed by a cosmic architect, and our job is to, well, interpret the stars, so to speak.
So it's either subterranean or celestial.
Exactly. In both cases, meaning is treated as something distant.
It's always somewhere else. You have to put on a headlamp and grab a shovel, or you need a very powerful telescope.
Yeah.
But either way, meaning is definitely not right here in front of you. It's hidden, obscured, and it requires a tremendous amount of labor to uncover.
But then you step into the world of post-structuralist philosophy, and suddenly both the telescope and the shovel are rendered completely useless.
Wait, completely useless?
Yeah, completely. We find ourselves looking at a landscape where meaning isn't hidden at all. It is honestly hiding in plain sight. It's sitting right on top of things.
I mean, that is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. And honestly, that's the mission we're taking on today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're tackling a subject that might just fundamentally rewire how you look at reality.
It's a big one.
It really is. We're unpacking one of the most famously mind-bending texts of the 20th century, Gilles Deleuze's 1969 book, The Logique of Sense. Now, I know what you might be thinking.
Continental philosophy from the late 60s.
Right. It sounds like a recipe for an immediate headache. But this deep dive is custom-tailored for you. We know you're the kind of person who wants to grasp these revolutionary, complex ideas without drowning in impenetrable academic jargon.
Which there is a lot of in the original text, to be fair.
Oh, tons of it. But we're going to explore a radical proposition today. The idea that meaning, or what Deleuze specifically calls sense, isn't a profound truth buried deep down in your soul, nor is it a lofty ideal floating high in the sky.
Right, it's a surface effect.
The surface effect. That shift in perspective from depth to surface sounds incredibly abstract at first, perhaps even a bit superficial.
It does, but it alters the mechanics of how we understand existence. Once you see it, you start noticing the surface everywhere.
I really want to emphasize to you, the listener, why this matters so much. Understanding this concept of the surface will fundamentally change how you view the words coming out of your mouth. It'll change how you experience the ticking of the clock. And most importantly, it offers a completely different tool set for how you cope with life's inevitable traumas, crises, and heartbreaks.
Because if meaning isn't something you have to dig for, how does that change the way you actually live your life?
Exactly. And we're going to build this up piece by piece.
To set the stage for you properly, I want you to imagine the backdrop behind me shifting. We're no longer in a modern studio.
Okay, where are we?
We're sitting in a hazy, smoke-filled Parisian cafe circa late 1968 or early 1969. The walls of this cafe are plastered with radical student protest posters, torn at the edges, sprayed with slogans.
Very revolutionary vibe.
Very. But someone has also taped up these whimsical, intricate line drawings from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland.
Wait, really? Alice in Wonderland next to protest posters?
Yeah, that bizarre juxtaposition, radical French political upheaval alongside Victorian nonsense literature is the exact aesthetic of our material today.
That's amazing.
We are drawing directly from Deleuze's text and its various appendices, which blend ancient Stoic philosophy, the paradoxical logic of Lewis Carroll, and the clinical depths of psychoanalysis.
It's a wild cocktail. But before we dive into the philosophy of surfaces itself, I feel like we have to understand the historical surface that actually produced this book.
Oh, absolutely. The context is everything.
Right. We can't ignore the vibe of 1969 Paris. We need to know what Deleuze was swimming in when he wrote this.
Well, you have to picture France in the immediate breathless aftermath of May 1968. The country is still reeling from a near revolution.
Like actual barricades in the streets, right?
Exactly. We were talking about a period where massive student protests escalated into general strikes that involved millions of workers. The economy ground to a halt. There were barricades built from torn-up cobblestones in the streets of the Latin Quarter. The president, Charles de Gaulle, secretly fled the country for a few hours because he thought the government was going to fall. The whole foundation of French society, its institutions, its authority structures, felt like it was crumbling.
That is intense.
It was. And in the intellectual world, that physical upheaval in the streets was mirrored by a massive theoretical earthquake in the universities and cafes.
So there was an appetite to tear down the old intellectual monuments, just like they were tearing up the cobblestones.
Precisely. The old ways of thinking were seen as complicit in the society that had just failed them. Prior to this point, the dominant philosophy in France was largely existentialism.
Right, so like Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yes, the absolute titan of French thought at the time. Existentialism placed massive emphasis on the deep internal freedom of the human subject. It was all about the individual's anguish, their profound responsibility, their deep inner core, making authentic choices in an absurd world.
It's very heavy, very individual focused.
Exactly. But in the late 60s, the intellectual spotlight shifted radically. A new generation of thinkers looked at Sartre and thought, this obsession with the deep, tragic, individual self isn't actually helping us understand how power, language, and society operate.
So where do they look instead?
The spotlight shifted towards structuralism, psychoanalysis, and linguistics. There was a massive wave of what was called anti-humanist thought.
Okay, let me stop you there, because anti-humanist sounds incredibly bleak.
It does sound harsh, yeah.
It sounds like they are saying humans have no value or that we should actively root against humanity. What did an intellectual in 1969 actually mean when they called themselves an anti-humanist?
Well, they certainly didn't mean they hated humans or that human life had no ethical value.
Okay, good.
Humanism in this specific philosophical context refers to the classical idea that the conscious, rational individual, the human subject with a capital S, is the sovereign center of the universe.
Like I am the master of my own destiny kind of thing.
Exactly. The humanist believes that you, as a conscious individual, are the absolute master of your own thoughts, the sole creator of meaning, and the driver of history.
And the anti-humanists disagreed.
Strongly. They looked at linguistics and sociology and said, actually, no, you don't speak language. Language speaks you.
Oh, wow. That's a flip.
Yeah. They argued that humans are situated inside massive, invisible structures of power, grammar, and culture that dictate what we can even think or say. We are not the sovereign authors of meaning. We're products of these systems.
That makes sense. So Deleuze is stepping into this incredibly charged arena.
He is, and he's writing specifically to dismantle two dominant historical traditions that have basically ruled Western thought for millennia, and he gives them these wonderfully evocative names. First, he targets the theologians of a misty sky.
Those are the people with a telescope, the ones looking up.
Precisely. The theologians of the misty sky are the thinkers, the religious figures, the philosophical idealists who look for meaning high up in divine ideals.
Right.
They look to God, to absolute eternal truths that supposedly exist somewhere far above the messy, chaotic reality of the physical world. For them, meaning is a star to navigate by.
So the truth of a thing is always in its perfected heavenly form, not the dirty version we have down here.
Exactly. And second, he targets the humanists of the caverns.
The people with the shovels.
These are the thinkers who dig deep into the hidden origins, into the dark recesses to find meaning. This absolutely includes classical Freudian psychoanalysis, which tells you that the truth of your behavior is buried deep in your unconscious mind.
Right, hidden in repressed childhood memories.
Yeah. It also includes certain orthodox forms of Marxism, which argue that the truth of society is buried in the deep material economic base, and everything else is just an illusion built on top.
So for the humanists of the caverns, meaning is a buried treasure that has to be painfully excavated and dragged into the light.
You nailed it.
So Deleuze looks at both of these camps, the ones staring longingly at the sky and the ones digging frantically in the dirt, and he says, you are both looking in the wrong direction.
He argues they're entirely missing the actual site where meaning is generated. Deleuze proposes a complete, ground-up rethinking of what meaning even is.
Okay.
His mission in the Logic of Sense is to demonstrate that meaning isn't something to be discovered out there in the cosmos, and it isn't something to be restored from some lost, repressed origin deep inside us.
Then what is it?
Meaning is a product. It is an active production. And it's produced by a machinery operating entirely on the surface.
I am trying to visualize this shift in perspective. If the old generations believed meaning was this heavy, profound, buried treasure, or this distant, glowing celestial body, Deleuze is basically coming along and saying, no, meaning is a byproduct.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Makes me think of static electricity.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, if you rub a balloon on a wool sweater, you create static electricity. That electricity doesn't exist deep inside the chemical structure of the balloon, right? And it doesn't float down from a thunderstorm in the sky. It is a pure effect created right here, right now, by the friction on the boundary between two surfaces. It's an emergent property.
That captures the mechanics of it wonderfully. Static electricity is the perfect illustration of a surface effect. It requires the physical bodies, the balloon and the sweater to interact, but the spark itself is a different kind of phenomenon altogether.
It belongs entirely to the surface contact.
Exactly. And this surface view that Deleuze champions here in 1969 is a massive anticipation of so many concepts that would come to define modern theory. It aligns deeply with structuralist linguistics, which argues that meaning doesn't live inside a word like a soul inside a body.
So where does it come from?
Meaning comes from the surface-level friction and differences between words. It also sets the stage for his contemporary, Michel Foucault. Foucault developed the idea of the surface of discourse.
Right, Foucault is huge in this area.
Instead of trying to psychoanalyze dead historical figures to find out what they really meant deep down, Foucault said we should just look at the surface of what was actually said, the rules of the discourse, the archive of statements.
So the surface holds all the keys if you know how to map it.
Exactly.
But to truly grasp this revolution, we can't just stay in 1969. Deleuze makes this argument by resurrecting a fight that is thousands of years old.
A very old fight.
Yeah, we have to look at the ancient philosophical battle between Plato and the Stoics.
To understand the cure Deleuze is offering, you have to understand the disease he's trying to treat. And for Deleuze, the disease of Western philosophy, the original sin that sent us all looking in the wrong directions, starts with Plato.
Wow, Plato is the bad guy here.
In this context, yes. Plato is the ultimate architect of height and depth.
He's the founding father of the misty sky theologians.
He built the sky. Plato established what Deleuze calls a subterranean dualism. For Plato, reality is fundamentally split into a hierarchy. Up high, in the transcendent realm of height, you have pure ideas or forms.
Like the perfect versions of things.
Yes. These are perfect, unchanging, eternal, and purely intellectual. Think of the perfect idea of a circle, or the perfect idea of justice, or the perfect idea of a bed.
But those perfect forms don't actually exist anywhere in the physical universe. I mean, you can't touch the pure idea of a circle.
No, you cannot. They are purely intelligible. Down here in our physical material world, we have what Plato calls copies.
Okay, copies.
A wooden wheel is a physical copy of the idea of a circle. A human court of law is a flawed copy of the idea of justice.
Got it.
Now, for Plato, these physical copies have a degree of validity, but only because they participate in the idea. They strive to imitate the perfection of the sky. The wheel tries its best to be perfectly round. The judge tries their best to be perfectly just.
So they derive their meaning from how well they resemble the high original. You know, that seems like a pretty standard way to view the world.
Yeah.
We have an ideal in our heads, and we try to make reality match it. Where's the conflict?
Well, the conflict arises because Plato noticed that there is a third category of things in the world, and it terrified him.
Terrified him.
Yes, he recognized that there's a rebellious, measureless, chaotic element to reality that refuses to sit still. There is a pure becoming that never stops moving, never settles down to be a good, obedient copy.
Oh, like things that are constantly morphing, aging, shifting context. The messy reality of time.
Exactly. Plato called these things simulacra. They are false copies. They're images that might superficially look like something, but they contain no internal resemblance to the pure idea. They are based on disparity and difference, not similarity.
So they're like the glitches in the system.
Yes, and because they elude the perfect idea, because they represent chaos, trickery, and endless change, Plato wanted to banish them. He essentially wanted to push the simulacra down into the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean to maintain cosmic order.
That's wild.
He established a strict moral and philosophical hierarchy. Pure ideas on top, obedient copies in the middle, and chaotic, deceptive simulacra locked away in the basement.
Okay, let me test an analogy here to ground this, because Platonism can get very ethereal very fast.
Sure, let's hear.
Think about a guy running an old-school movie theater.
Okay.
Plato is the projectionist. The pure, pristine film reel, sitting safely up high in the projection booth, untouched by the audience, is the idea.
Right, it's the perfect original master copy.
Exactly. Now, the movie actually playing on the physical screen down in the theater is the copy. It's a good, faithful representation of the real, even if the screen is a little dusty.
Yeah, it participates in the original idea.
Right. But then you have the glitches. A hair gets caught in the projector gate, the bulb flickers, the film starts to melt and warp the image, or a shadow passes over the lens.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Those weird, chaotic distortions that don't belong to the original script. Those are the simulacra. And Plato, as the obsessive projectionist, wants to cut those melted frames out, hide the glitches, and pretend they don't exist because they threaten the perfect illusion of the pure film.
That captures Plato's anxiety perfectly. He wants to suppress the distortion to preserve the purity of the original model. He wants a world of static, reliable truths, not a world of melting film.
But then, a few centuries after Plato, along come the Stoics.
Yes, the Stoics. And Deleuze dedicates an enormous amount of energy to the Stoics because they executed a massive philosophical reversal. They look at Plato's rigid theater of height and depth, and they completely dismantle it.
They break into the projection booth.
They tear down the booth altogether. The Stoics overturned Platonism by proposing a completely new division of reality, and neither side of their division involves a lofty sky of perfect ideas.
Okay, so what's their setup?
First, the Stoics argue there is the realm of physical bodies. Bodies have tension, they have mass, physical qualities, they mix together, they act and react upon each other.
Like physics.
Exactly. Fire burns wood. A horse eats grass. A sword cuts human skin. This all happens in the physical depths of the world, and it all happens in the immediate present moment.
Okay, that is straightforward materialism, the physical stuff of the universe interacting. Atoms bumping into atoms.
But here is their stroke of genius, the concept that Deleuze falls in love with. The Stoics recognize that when these physical bodies interact, they produce something else.
What do they produce?
The interactions of bodies produce incorporeal events, and these events are absolutely not physical things. They have no mass, no thickness, they are pure effects, and they dance entirely on the surface.
Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack incorporeal event, because that sounds like a contradiction. An event usually implies something happening physically.
It does in our normal language.
Deleuze highlights this incredibly vivid, honestly kind of gruesome example from the ancient Stoics about a scalpel and flesh.
Yeah.
Walk us through that, because it clarifies this split perfectly.
It's the defining illustration. Let's look at the act of surgery. You have a metal scalpel that is a physical body. It has weight, sharpness, chemical composition. And you have human skin, which is another physical body, composed of cells and tissues.
Right.
When the scalpel cuts the flesh, the bodies interact in the physical depths. They mix. Blood flows. Cells are violently separated. Nerves fire. That is all physical cause and effect. Body acting upon body.
Sure.
But the Stoics argue the actual attribute of being cut, the pure abstract event of the cut itself, is not a physical thing.
Wait, how is the cut not physical? I can see the cut. It's right there on the arm.
You can see the separated skin, you can measure the depth of the wound, you can weigh the scalpel, but you cannot isolate or weigh being cut.
Oh, I see.
Being cut is a verb, an infinitive. It is an incorporeal event. It is an emergent attribute, a way of being that, as Deleuze beautifully translates it, frolics on the surface of being. The scalpel and the flesh are the physical causes. Being cut is the incorporeal surface effect.
So there's a fundamental break in the chain of causality here.
A massive break.
Right.
The Stoics split the causal relation in two. Bodies cause things in other bodies. The metal severs the tissue. But bodies also cause these entirely different phenomena, incorporeal effects.
Right.
And crucially, these incorporeal effects don't physically cause anything else. The abstract concept of being cut doesn't cause blood to flow. The physical severing of the vein causes the blood to flow. The incorporeal event is a sterile, impassive result.
That's a really subtle but huge distinction.
What the Stoics essentially did was take all the characteristics of eternity and truth that Plato gave to his perfect high-up ideas, and they pulled them down from the sky, flattened them out, and spread them over the material world as this thin film of incorporeal events.
They took the heavens and turned them into a membrane stretching over the earth.
Exactly. What Plato sought to hide in the depths, the endless becoming, the verbs, the events, the simulacra, the Stoics brought right up to the surface and made them the very essence of meaning.
Deleuze offers this incredible analogy for this relationship between the physical bodies and the incorporeal event. He compares it to a fogged-up window pane on a cold day. Let's trace the mechanics of this because I think it makes the abstract incredibly concrete.
Yes, let's.
You have a pane of glass, you have the cold air outside, and you have the warm, moist air inside a room. Those are all physical bodies.
Right.
They interact in depth. The temperature differential causes condensation to form on the glass. That is purely physical cause and effect. But then someone walks up and traces letters in the condensation with their finger. They write a word.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The glass, the water droplets, the finger. Those are still just bodies interacting. The words you read, the meaning of the letters, that is the surface effect.
Beautifully put.
The meaning isn't made of glass, and it isn't made of water. It is an incorporeal event produced by the arrangement of the physical bodies, but it exists on an entirely different plane of reality.
That window pane analogy is the master key to understanding almost all of modern literary and linguistic theory. Because if you extrapolate that, it's exactly how we must view language and meaning.
How so?
Think about reading a physical book. The physical bodies involved are the wood pulp paper, the chemical ink, the light reflecting off the page, and your biological retinas receiving the light. Those physical bodies are just the glass and the condensation. They act upon each other.
Right.
But the meaning of the novel you're reading, the tragedy of the characters, the philosophical concepts, you cannot find the tragedy in the chemical analysis of the ink. The meaning is the incorporeal event produced by the layout of the ink. It hovers just above the page. It is a pure surface phenomenon.
Let me push this analogy a little further because I want to see how durable this surface actually is.
Go.
What happens if I take a rag and wipe the foggy window perfectly clean? The physical bodies, the condensation holding the shape of the letters are gone. The finger has walked away. Does the incorporeal event of the word, the meaning, just vanish back into nothingness?
That's a great question.
If meaning is just a surface effect, is it that fragile? Does it require the constant physical presence of the ink or the fog to exist?
That is an excellent stress test of the concept. The short answer is no. The event does not vanish into nothingness, but its relationship to the physical world changes.
Okay, how?
When you wipe the window clean, you destroy the physical actualization of the event in that specific moment. The bodies have stopped expressing it. But the event itself, the pure abstract sense of the word you read, retreats into what the Stoics call the aeon.
The aeon.
Yes, the time of pure events, which we will explore deeply a bit later. The event becomes a pure virtuality. It waits to be actualized again.
Okay, I think I see.
Think of a song. If you smash a piano, you destroy the physical bodies capable of producing the song in that room. You've wiped the window clean, but you haven't destroyed the incorporeal event of the song itself.
The melody still exists conceptually.
Exactly. It just lacks a physical surface to express it right now. The surface of sense is incredibly fragile in its physical manifestation, but incredibly resilient in its abstract nature.
Okay, so if meaning is this surface effect, hovering like fog on a window, how does it actually work when we open our mouths and speak? How does human language generate this effect?
That's the next big hurdle.
Deleuze makes a move here that I find utterly fascinating and probably shocking to the rigid French academic establishment of 1969. To explain the deep philosophical mechanics of language, he doesn't turn to Kant or Hegel or Descartes.
No, he does.
He turns to a Victorian mathematician who wrote surreal children's books, Carroll.
It's a staggering, brilliant move. Deleuze elevates Lewis Carroll to the status of a master philosopher. Because Carroll, in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, is the ultimate cartographer of surface logic and pure becoming.
Alice is the perfect test case for this. Think about the iconic moments in that story. What happens when she eats the cake that says, "Eat to me," or drinks the potion?
Right, she changes size.
Deleuze points out something so subtle but profound about her transformation. He says she doesn't just grow larger, she grows without shrinking, and vice versa. That sounds like a semantic trick. What does he mean?
Well, at the exact moment she is becoming larger than she was a second ago, she is simultaneously becoming smaller than she will be a second from now.
Oh, wow.
And that simultaneous movement in two directions at once is the absolute essence of what Deleuze calls pure becoming. Think about our normal conception of time and identity. We want things to be fixed. I am a certain height right now.
Yeah, you can measure me.
But Alice, when she is growing, completely eludes the fixed present moment. You can never catch her at a stable size and take a photograph and say, this is exactly how big Alice is.
Because the moment the shutter clicks, she is already larger and smaller.
Exactly. She's pure verb. She is the event of growing, shrinking. And Deleuze sees this not just as a clever fairy tale trope, but as the fundamental nature of the incorporeal event, and therefore the fundamental nature of sense. Sense never sits still to be measured.
To really see how this fluid, unmeasurable sense works in our daily lives, we have to look at how Deleuze dismantles the standard, traditional way we're taught to view language. He says that the old model of language relies on 3 standard dimensions.
Yes.
Walk us through these 3 dimensions, because we use them every day without thinking about it.
We do, and they seem perfectly adequate until you really stress test them. The first traditional dimension of any proposition, any sentence you speak, is called denotation. This is the most basic function. It's the act of pointing to a physical thing in the world. Imagine we're sitting at a table and there's a ceramic mug in front of us. If I point at it and say, that cup is blue, the denotation is the direct relationship between the word cup and the physical ceramic object sitting on the table.
It's the label on the jar. The word connects directly to the meat and potatoes physical world.
Exactly. The second dimension is manifestation.
Manifestation, okay.
This dimension doesn't refer to the object on the table at all. It refers entirely to the subject speaking. It reveals the speaker's beliefs, their desires, their internal state of mind.
Okay, how so?
When I say that cup is blue, the manifestation is the fact that I, the speaker, possess the cognitive belief that it's blue, and I possess the desire to communicate that belief to you.
Okay, so if denotation is the what I'm talking about, manifestation is the who is doing the talking and what they want.
Yes, the subjective origin of the statement. The third dimension is signification.
Significant.
This moves away from the physical object and the speaker and enters the realm of pure logic and universal concepts. Signification is the relationship of the words to other words and to universal ideas. It establishes the conditions of truth.
Give me an example.
For the statement, that cup is blue, to have any meaning, it relies on the logical signification of what the concept of cup and the concept of blue mean in relation to the entire network of the English language. You have to understand the universal concept of a vessel for liquids and the concept of color spectrums.
So we have pointing at physical objects, expressing our internal beliefs, and linking abstract logical concepts. Honestly, that seems like a pretty airtight system.
It really does.
It covers the physical world, the human mind, and abstract logic. What is the problem? Why does Deleuze say this isn't enough?
Because Deleuze points out that if you look closely, these 3 dimensions form a frustrating, inescapable logical circle. They chase each other's tails.
How do they do that?
Think about it. Denotation, pointing at the cup, relies on signification. You have to know the abstract concept of a cup to know what to point at.
Right.
But signification relies on manifestation. The concepts only exist because human minds believe in them and formulate them.
Okay, I follow.
And manifestation relies on denotation. My belief is meaningless unless it's grounded by pointing at things in the real world.
It's an infinite regression. It's like asking a dictionary what a word means. It just gives you other words which point to other words, and you never actually break out of the book into reality.
Exactly. The system is closed. It explains how language functions once it's already running, but it doesn't explain how the engine starts.
It doesn't tell you where the meaning comes from originally.
Precisely. The 3 dimensions cannot explain their own genesis. They cannot explain how a string of sounds comes to have meaning in the first place. Therefore, Deleuze introduces his massive breakthrough. To break the circle, there must be a 4th dimension, and he calls this 4th dimension sense.
Now, the 4th dimension sounds like we're shifting from philosophy to science fiction.
I know, but he means this purely logically. He says sense doesn't exist outside the proposition, and yet it is the attribute of the thing. He uses this phrase that I find incredibly slippery. He calls it an extra being.
What on earth is an extra being?
It is a difficult concept, but let's go back to our examples to make it tangible. Let's say you look out the window at a forest in springtime and you say the sentence, "The tree greens."
Okay.
What exactly is the greening that you were talking about? The greening isn't a physical block of wood. You cannot walk out there, chop down the tree, and hold a piece of greening in your hand. So it is not the physical body.
Right. I can hold the leaf, but I can't hold the verb greening.
Exactly. But on the other hand, the greening isn't just a subjective hallucination inside your head. The tree is actually undergoing a process. So the greening is the incorporeal event.
I see.
It is expressed by your sentence, but it is attributed to the physical tree. Sense has this remarkable double nature. It acts like a hinge. It turns one face toward the physical things, the tree, acting as their attribute, and it turns its other face toward the proposition, your words, acting as what is expressed.
It's the thin incorporeal film, the extra being, that sits exactly on the boundary between reality and language.
Yes.
There's an anecdote Deleuze highlights from the sources from The Mouse's Tale and Alice in Wonderland that illustrates this friction between the physical world and the surface of sense so perfectly. I want to tell this story because it really grounds the theory.
Please do. It's a great one.
Alice is listening to the mouse tell this incredibly dry, boring story about English history to dry everyone off. The mouse is speaking in this very formal cadence and says, "And even Steigen, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable."
Classic Carroll setup.
Right. At this point, the duck interrupts him and loudly asks, "Found what?" The mouse is annoyed and replies, "Found it. Of course you know what it means." And the duck says, "I know what it means well enough when I find a thing."
Yeah.
Generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?
It's a brilliant, hilarious piece of dialogue, but Deleuze uses it to show a profound philosophical miscommunication.
How so?
The duck and the mouse are literally operating in two different dimensions of reality. The duck is operating purely in the realm of denotation and the physical depth of bodies. For the duck, a word like it must point to a physical, material, consumable thing in the world, a frog or a worm. The duck's reality is based on eating and being eaten.
The duck is the ultimate materialist. If I can't bite it, it doesn't mean anything.
Completely, but the mouse is operating entirely on the surface of language.
Yeah.
When the mouse says, "found it," he's not referring to a physical object.
Right, he's referring to the situation.
Exactly. He is using it to refer to sense, to the incorporeal event expressed by the previous part of his sentence. The it is the abstract political situation the Archbishop found himself in. This fundamental duality, eating physical bodies in the depth versus speaking language on the surface, is the central tension of Deleuze's whole project.
Because you cannot eat sense, but you also cannot speak or think without it.
Exactly.
I feel like we have a solid grasp on what the surface is now.
Huh.
We have this layer of sense floating between our words and physical things, like the fog on the window acting as the medium for the letters.
Yes.
But here's the massive question. Where does this sense actually come from? How is it generated? The window needs the physical cold air and the warm breath to create the fog. What is the engine that pumps meaning onto the surface of language?
That is the core of the book.
And this brings us to what might be the absolute most counterintuitive part of this entire deep dive, the mechanics of nonsense.
Yes, the production of sense. If sense isn't a fact that is produced, we have to find the factory where it is made. And Deleuze locates that factory in the concept of nonsense.
But we have to be incredibly careful here because Deleuze's definition of nonsense is the exact opposite of what we normally assume it means.
Totally the opposite.
We normally assume nonsense just means gibberish, white noise, a lack of meaning. He makes a crucial distinction here by comparing the existentialist writer Albert Camus with Lewis Carroll, right?
That comparison is vital. For existentialist thinkers like Camus, nonsense, or what they famously termed the absurd, was a profound lack of meaning. It was a deficiency that caused human tragedy.
Okay, walk me through that.
You look up at the vast universe, you ask it for purpose, for meaning, and the universe responds with cold, deafening silence. That silence is the absurd. It means there simply isn't enough sense to go around to satisfy human desire.
It's the tragic empty void.
Exactly. But Deleuze looks at this and says, Carroll, yes. Camus, no. For Deleuze, drawing his logic from Carroll's linguistic play, nonsense is absolutely not a lack of meaning.
What is it then?
It is an excess of meaning. It is a highly productive, overflowing, hyperactive force. Nonsense isn't the failure of language. It is the chaotic, churning engine that makes language possible in the first place.
I have to admit, I'm genuinely stuck here. My brain is pushing back against this.
It's a tough concept to swallow.
If nonsense is an excess of meaning, why does it feel so confusing? When I read a nonsense poem like Jabberwocky, I don't feel an excess of meaning. I feel like my brain is throwing up error codes.
Right.
When I read "'Twas brillig and the slithy tobes did gyre and gimble in the wabe," I have no idea what a tove is. How is an error code productive?
That feeling of throwing an error code is exactly the mechanism at work. Think about what your brain is actively doing when you encounter the word brillig or tove. It doesn't just shut down.
No, I guess it doesn't.
It goes into hyperdrive.
Yeah.
It frantically searches through its entire database of sounds, prefixes, suffixes, and associated imagery, trying to construct a meaning. The error code forces the system to work harder, to make new connections.
Okay, I think I see. Let's use Carroll's famous example of the portmanteau word. Think of the word frumious, as in the frumious Bandersnatch.
Perfect example.
Carroll explicitly explained that one. He said it's a combination of the words fuming and furious. You take two perfectly good words, pack them into a suitcase, and squash them together into one shape.
Yes. And Deleuze analyzes the cognitive mechanics of these portmanteau words deeply. He argues that a word like frumious acts as what he calls a paradoxical element, or an empty square on a chessboard.
An empty square.
Remember those two series we talked about earlier? In any structure of language, you have the series of physical words, the sounds we make, the signifiers, and the series of abstract concepts, the signifieds.
The noises vibrating in my throat and the ideas lighting up in my brain.
Exactly. Normally, we try to match them up one-to-one. But Deleuze says these two series are fundamentally out of sync. There is always a disequilibrium.
And the portmanteau word?
The portmanteau word, the nonsense word, is the wild card that circulates rapidly between these two out-of-sync series. Because frumious doesn't have one fixed denotation in the physical world, you can't point to a wild frumious in the forest. It fails to observe its proper place.
So it's constantly displaced.
Yes. It rams into the other words and concepts in your head, causing them to vibrate, ramify, and resonate.
So meaning isn't something that just sits passively inside a normal word. Meaning is the spark generated by this rapid circulation of nonsense, forcing the brain to reconcile the impossible.
That is the structure of production. The nonsense word acts like a two-sided mirror. It guarantees that the two series, the words and the concepts, communicate with each other, but it only achieves this by making them endlessly diverge.
It forces the mind to constantly shift back and forth, generating a fresh spark of sense with every single pass. Okay, I think I see the mechanics now, but let me play devil's advocate for the listener.
Please do.
What is the practical takeaway here? Is Deleuze telling us that to live a meaningful life, we should just start speaking in tongues? Is he saying, hey, structured logic is a prison, go embrace gibberish at the grocery store?
Oh, definitely not.
Because that seems like a fast track to getting institutionalized, not enlightened.
No, he is absolutely not advocating for people to abandon coherent speech in their daily lives. Deleuze is offering a highly rigorous logic of how systems operate. He is pointing out that at the very structural heart of all logical, organized, rational language, there must be an empty, displaced, nonsensical element that keeps the whole system moving.
Wait, there has to be nonsense for sense to exist.
Think about it. If human language were a perfectly closed, mathematically precise one-to-one system where every single word had exactly one fixed, unchanging meaning, what would happen?
We would be like computers running basic code. We could only output what was pre-programmed.
Precisely. We could never say anything truly new. We could never write a poem. We could never invent a new metaphor. We could never formulate a scientific hypothesis. And we could never have a revolution in our thinking.
So the nonsense is the wiggle room.
That empty square of nonsense, that linguistic wiggle room where words don't quite fit their meanings, is, as Deleuze beautifully puts it, the promise of all mythic and aesthetic invention.
It is the reason art works.
It is the reason a joke can make you laugh by subverting your expectations. Nonsense is the essential lubricant in the engine of language. Without it, the gears of thought seize up completely.
It's the glitch that allows for evolution. But, and this is a massive but, Deleuze doesn't just celebrate this. He also issues a truly terrifying warning about what happens when this delicate surface machinery of nonsense breaks down.
He does, yeah.
He wants to show us how vital this thin film of sense is to our actual sanity. And to do this, he contrasts Lewis Carroll's playful nonsense with the harrowing language of Antonin Artaud.
This is perhaps the most sobering and intense part of the entire book. Antonin Artaud was a brilliant, radical French writer and theater director in the early 20th century.
Right.
But he also suffered profoundly from severe schizophrenia. He spent years in asylums, undergoing brutal treatments. And Deleuze insists that while both Carroll and Artaud write things that might superficially look like nonsense to the average reader, they are dealing with radically, fundamentally different problems.
They inhabit completely different dimensions of reality.
Yes.
Deleuze draws this chilling distinction. He says, Carroll's is the work of a man who ate well. Artaud's language issues from torment. What does he mean by that? How does their nonsense differ mechanically?
Well, Carroll's nonsense, the portmanteau words, the riddles, the logical paradoxes, operates entirely safely on the surface. It is a playful ramification of the linguistic series. It skims over the top of reality like a water bug on a pond.
The words don't physically hurt you.
But in the experience of schizophrenia, as Artaud documented it from the inside, that protective metaphysical surface of sense completely collapses.
The fogged window pane doesn't just get wiped clean. The glass shatters entirely.
The glass shatters, and there is no longer any barrier between the physical outside and the psychological inside. When the surface of sense collapses, you fall violently back into the terrifying, unmediated depths of physical bodies.
What does that mean for language?
For Artaud, words cease to be abstract symbols that hover in the air. They lost their incorporeal sense. Instead, they became heavy physical objects. They became phonetic fragments, sharp consonants, and guttural vowels that literally acted upon his physical body, piercing his skin, bruising his organs, and suffocating him.
The words literally became weapons. When someone spoke to him, it wasn't an exchange of ideas, it was a physical assault.
Yes. In the schizophrenic depth, Deleuze observes, every word is physical and immediately affects the body. There is no distance anymore between speaking and eating, between a word and a physical action.
The duck from Alice in Wonderland is taken over completely.
Yeah.
Everything is just bodies grinding against bodies.
Completely. Deleuze points this out not to romanticize madness in any way. In fact, he explicitly warns against the generalized debacle and profound suffering of schizophrenia, but to show us how incredibly precious, fragile, and necessary the surface of sense really is.
Because our day-to-day sanity depends entirely on maintaining that thin film where meaning can dance and play without physically crushing our bodies.
That is a staggering realization. It makes you realize that the simple act of having a conversation, being able to abstract a concept, being able to use a harsh word without feeling it physically slice open your chest, is an absolute miracle of this surface effect.
We take the surface for granted until it breaks.
It is the highest achievement of the surface, to organize chaos into communicable sense without being destroyed by it.
So having explored how this incredibly fragile surface works in language and how the engine of nonsense powers it, we now have to turn a corner.
Okay, where to?
Because the event, this incorporeal surface effect we've been talking about, doesn't just have a strange relationship with language. It has a very specific and frankly completely mind-bending relationship with a clock. If meaning is an event, when exactly does it happen?
Time. Time is where Deleuze's logic becomes incredibly beautiful, but also requires us to stretch our imaginations. Once again, he borrows the architecture from the Stoics, who believed that time is not a single, uniform thing.
They argued there are two completely different readings of time operating simultaneously. The first is called chronos.
Yes, chronos.
Like chronological time, the ticking of the clock.
Exactly. Chronos is the deep, thick time of physical bodies. It is the time of the depths. In the realm of chronos, only the present moment truly exists. The past is just physical matter that has already degraded, and the future is just physical matter that hasn't mixed yet.
Oh, so it's all just now.
Yes. Chronos is a massive, living present that basically absorbs the past and the future into itself as it rolls forward. It is a cosmic mixture where physical causes and effects are happening right now, constantly.
So chronos is the time of digestion. It's the time of your cells aging. It's the time of two cars physically colliding at an intersection. It is the heavy, undeniable reality of the physical world happening right now.
Yes. It is the time of bodies acting upon bodies. But Deleuze contrasts Chronos with the time of the surface event, which the Stoics called the aeon.
A-I-O-N. The aeon.
Yeah.
How does the time of the surface behave differently?
The aeon operates by completely opposite rules. It is the time of incorporeal events, and its most defining, baffling characteristic is that it has no present at all.
Okay, stop right there. A time without a present. That sounds like a riddle. How can something exist in time if it is never happening now?
Because in the aeon, time is not a thick present. It is an infinitely subdivisible, abstract, straight line. Think back to our definition of an event. An event is just a pure effect, an abstract boundary.
Because it has no physical mass.
Right. Because it has no mass, it never actually is. The very fraction of a microsecond you try to pin it down and say, the event is happening now, it immediately divides into the past and the future.
I see.
In the aeon, the event is always something that has already passed and simultaneously something that is yet to come.
I'm going to build out a concrete example here because a time without a present is incredibly hard to wrap your head around without a grounding image.
Please do.
Let's think of a massive historical event, the Battle of Waterloo. If we look at Waterloo through the lens of Chronos, what we see? We see the physical soldiers fighting and dying, the cannons physically firing iron balls, the blood soaking into the mud, the exhaustion in the muscles of the horses.
Right.
All of that physical agony and exertion is happening in Chronos. It is the deep, messy, bloody, incredibly heavy present. It is bodies acting violently on other bodies.
Correct. That is the physical actualization of the battle. That is what you would see if you were standing in the mud.
But the event of the battle, the neutral, impassive, abstract, historical concept of the Battle of Waterloo that hovers over the field like a ghost that exists in the aeon.
Exactly.
If you are a historian trying to define the event, you can never point to a single swinging sword and say, aha, I have caught the exact moment of the battle, because any second you pick is just physical bodies moving. The pure event of the battle is always something that is just about to start or something that has just finished.
It is the pure infinitive verb, to battle. It escapes the present.
Phenomenal illustration.
If the pure event in the aeon is a sign, Deleuze says it is a tale, a novella, a rumor, never a physical actuality. Consider a soldier on that battlefield who is mortally wounded.
Okay.
In Chronos, his physical body is failing in the present moment, his heart rate drops, his cells are dying. But in the aeon, the incorporeal event of his death is that he is always perpetually due to die in the future, and he is always perpetually having been wounded in the past.
The event stretches out infinitely in both directions along that straight line, but it skips over the present entirely.
Yes, it's like the event is a ghost haunting the physical present, constantly arriving and constantly departing, but never actually touching down to rest.
That's a great image.
And the secret of the event, the profound reason this distinction matters, is that the aeon allows all events to communicate with each other.
How do they communicate?
Well, in the thick present of Chronos, physical bodies are isolated from each other by space and time. The mud at Waterloo has no physical connection to the mud in your backyard today.
Obviously.
But on the empty, infinite straight line of the aeon, all events are stretched out on the exact same surface. They connect. In the aeon, there are no truly private events.
Wait, hold on. No private events. My life feels entirely composed of private events. My embarrassments, my private victories, my personal grief, those belong to me alone. How can they not be private?
In their physical actualization in Chronos, yes, they are completely yours. Your body feels the tears, your face flushes with embarrassment. But as pure incorporeal events, as abstract surface effects stripped of their physical weight, they share the exact same infinite plane as everything else.
Oh, wow.
Deleuze argues that in the aeon, everything is a singular, massive event connected by non-causal correspondences. The abstract shape of your personal heartbreak and the abstract shape of a historical revolution share the same topology on the surface of the aeon. They resonate with each other. They echo.
Which brings us finally to the ultimate practical culmination of all this incredibly complex logic.
The ethics.
We've talked about how meaning operates as a surface between words and things. We've talked about how the engine of nonsense keeps language alive. We've talked about the ghostly infinite time of the event. But how do you, the listener sitting in your car or walking your dog right now, actually use this?
It's the big question.
How do you live with the events that happen to you, especially the catastrophic ones, using this philosophy?
This is where Deleuze's abstract logic translates into a profound, actionable ethics. It is the ethics of the event, and he frames this ethical challenge by analyzing what he calls the crack-up.
He draws this concept largely from the American writer F. Scott Fitzgerald, right? Fitzgerald famously wrote a devastating essay called The Crack-Up about his own mental, emotional, and artistic breakdown.
Yes, he draws heavily on Fitzgerald and also on the writer Malcolm Lowry and his brutal struggles with alcoholism. Deleuze sees the phenomenon of the crack-up as the perfect, tragic demonstration of the two levels of reality we have been discussing.
How so?
When a crisis hits a human life, there is first the silent, incorporeal crack on the surface of the aeon. This is the pure event. It is entirely imperceptible. You don't even know it happened in the moment. It is just a subtle, abstract shift in the trajectory of your life.
It is like a microscopic stress fracture in a car windshield. You hit a tiny bump, the structural integrity shifts, but you can't even see the crack yet. It makes no sound.
Exactly. The pure event is silent. But then there is the second level, the messy, noisy, destructive actualization of that crack in the depths of the physical body in Chronos.
The physical manifestation.
Yes, this is the descent into alcoholism, the crippling depression, the physical nervous breakdown. The great danger of human existence, Deleuze says, is that the silent surface crack deepens, travels down into the physical depths, and completely shatters the noisy body. The event becomes so fully actualized in the flesh that it destroys you.
So here's the million-dollar question. If we cannot avoid the silent cracks because events are inevitably going to happen to us, traumas will occur, loss is guaranteed, how do we live with it? How do we stop the invisible stress fracture from spiderwebbing and shattering the windshield of our lives entirely?
The answer lies in a radical reinterpretation of Stoic ethics, which Deleuze adopts and transforms. The ethical imperative of this entire philosophy boils down to a single, immensely difficult task: willing the event.
Okay, I have to stop you because willing the event sounds dangerously close to toxic positivity or passive resignation. If my house burns down or I get a terrible medical diagnosis, am I supposed to just say, well, I guess I will this to happen? Is this just giving up and pretending everything is fine?
It is the furthest thing from passive resignation. Deleuze is incredibly clear that resignation is just another disguised form of resentment. Resentment is the enemy.
Okay.
Willing the event absolutely does not mean you wanted your house to burn down or that you are happy or grateful that you got sick. It means finding a way to extract the eternal truth of the event without succumbing to the resentment of asking, why me?
I see.
It means affirming the pure abstract event in the aeon while actively separating it from the messy physical pain of its actualization in Chronos.
There's an incredibly poignant real-life story that Deleuze highlights to illustrate what this actually looks like in practice. The story of Joe Bousquet.
Yeah.
We need to talk about him because it takes this out of the realm of theory.
Yes. Joe Bousquet was a French poet who fought in World War I. During a battle, he was struck by a bullet that severed his spinal cord. He was completely paralyzed.
Such a tragedy.
He spent the entire rest of his life bedridden in a room with the shutters closed. He is the ultimate extreme example of a human being forced to live with a catastrophic, irreversible physical event.
And despite that unimaginable physical suffering, Bousquet wrote this line in his journals that Deleuze quotes, and it honestly gives me chills every time I think about it.
Let's hear it.
Bousquet wrote, "My wound existed before me. I was born to embody it."
It is a staggering philosophical statement. It is the absolute pure expression of amor fati, the love of one's fate.
But he's not saying he's happy about it.
Emphatically not. Bousquet is not saying he is glad he was shot. He is not celebrating the physical bullet that ruined his body in Chronos. What he is doing is executing a massive psychological and philosophical pivot.
He's willing the event.
Yes, he is saying that the pure event of the wound, the abstract, impersonal, pre-individual singularity of that wound on the surface of the aeon, has an eternal truth. By stating that he was born to embody it, he ceases to be the passive, resentful victim of a random piece of metal flying through the air. He seizes agency. He becomes the quasi-cause of what happened to him.
He flips the dynamic. Instead of being the victim of his trauma, he becomes the offspring of his own events.
Exactly. He wills the event so powerfully with such fierce intellectual clarity that he extracts its splendor. He radically separates the pure event from the physical suffering, and in doing so, he reclaims his inner freedom.
Because he refuses to ask the humanist questions. Why me? Whose fault is this? What is the hidden meaning of my suffering?
Because those questions trap you in the depths of resentment. Instead, he asks the Stoic question, how can I be equal to this event? How can I become worthy of what has happened to me?
Let me try to translate this into a broader life strategy for the listener.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the single most powerful takeaway from the entire book. How do we do what Bousquet did? Deleuze offers a metaphor for this ethical stance. He compares it to being an actor playing a role on stage.
Yes, the actor's paradox. It is the perfect model for the ethics of the surface.
Think of a brilliant actor on stage playing Hamlet. Over the course of the play, the actor is portraying profound grief, madness, betrayal, and eventually death. The actor must fully inhabit those realities.
Right.
But, and this is the key, the actor isn't actually dying on stage. The actor's not actually losing their mind. The actor represents the event. They take the raw, chaotic, painful reality of human suffering and they disengage an abstract line from it. They keep only its contour, its pure expression, its splendor, without suffering the physical destruction.
Deleuze calls this specific action counter-actualization. The event actualizes itself in your body. You counter-actualize it by stepping out of your body and playing it as a role.
Counteractualization. So when a crisis hits your life, a sudden firing, a betrayal, a loss, your physical body and your emotions are absolutely going to feel the pain. Your heart rate will spike, you will cry, your chest will ache. That is the unavoidable actualization in Chronos.
You can't avoid that.
But Deleuze is saying you must simultaneously train yourself to become the actor of your own life. Even while you are crying, you must step back onto the surface of the aeon, look at the event as a script you are suddenly performing, and counteractualize it. You mime your own trauma perfectly. You extract its pure sense.
By performing that internal pivot, you prevent the messy reality from completely destroying you. You affirm a profound distance from your own suffering. You don't let the silent crack deepen into the body to the point of total, irreparable destruction.
You hover over your own pain.
Yes, observing it, playing it, just like an actor hovers over their tragic role. It requires an immense lightness of spirit, requires a very specific kind of humor.
Humor. Yes, Deleuze makes a big deal about humor versus irony. Irony is about heightened depth. It's Socratic. It's about looking down on people, exposing false claims, pointing out hypocrisies from a position of superiority. But humor, true cosmic humor, is the art of the surface.
Yes, to view your own life, your own deepest traumas, as an impersonal event floating on the surface of the aeon requires a profound, almost unimaginable cosmic humor.
It's incredible to think about.
It is the ability to, as Deleuze beautifully phrases it, stretch your skin like a drum. When the chaotic events of the world strike you, if you are stuck in the depths, they will break your bones. But if you can stretch your skin like a drum upon the surface, the events will bounce off you, and instead of breaking you, they will make music.
Let's pull all of these threads together because we have covered an immense amount of philosophical ground today. We started in the rebellious, tear gas-filled streets of 1969 Paris, looking for a way out of the old, exhausted philosophies of height and depth.
We rejected the theologians of the misty sky waiting for divine salvation, and we rejected the humanists of the caverns digging endlessly for hidden, repressed origins.
We brought it all back to the surface. We looked at the fogged-up window panes of the ancient Stoics and learned that meaning isn't a buried treasure you have to excavate. It is a surface effect, a fragile, incorporeal event hovering between physical bodies.
We dove down the rabbit hole with Lewis Carroll to understand the engine of this surface. We saw how the paradoxical nonsense of portmanteau words like fermius is the actual spark that produces sense, keeping human language alive, divergent, and capable of invention, while avoiding the terrifying collapse into the schizophrenic depths of our toad.
We stood on the empty, infinite straight line of the aeon, realizing that the true time of events has no present moment at all, that it's always just about to happen or has just passed, allowing all our personal histories to communicate on a grand, impersonal scale.
And finally, we learned the ultimate ethical lesson of how to survive the crack-up, how to counter-actualize our own inevitable traumas by acting them out, willing the event, extracting their pure splendor, and playing our parts with the cosmic humor of Joe Busquet.
It is quite simply a totally different way to walk through the world. Once you absorb this, it makes reality feel lighter somehow, less like a crushing burden you have to carry or a secret code you are constantly failing to crack, and more like a vast, complex surface you get to skate across.
It is a philosophy of immense, almost dizzying freedom, but that freedom is only accessible if you are courageous enough to let go of the deep anchors and stop wishing for the high stars.
So, to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, perhaps as you run into your next obstacle. The next time you face a sudden crisis, a crack in the windshield of your life, what would happen if you stopped your instinct to dig? What if you stopped digging into the depths of why it happened to you, or whose fault it is, or what deep hidden flaw in your psychology caused it? What if instead you stepped back onto the surface, viewed the crisis as a pure impersonal event floating in the aeon, stretched your skin like a drum, and simply asked, how can I play this role so beautifully that I become worthy of what has just happened to me?
That is the ultimate Stoic challenge, updated for the modern world.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the surface of reality. Keep tracing your letters on the foggy windows of life, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.